Hey guys, Alex with Straight 6 Racing. Today I'm going to show you how to 8HP swap your 335xi. In this case, it's an N55 all-wheel drive. I'm going to give you some perspective on where we are starting so that you can do the work you need to do and pick up right where I am. And I'm going to try and show you start to finish exactly what's needed, everything you need to know about getting this transmission from a 6 HP to an 8 HP. So obviously we have the stock transmission out, we have the exhaust off, front half of the drive shaft is off. Remember to mark that. And cooler lines that come off of the stock trans. We have the transfer case wiring harness, we have the stock wiring harness, and then we also have the stock shifter. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring the car down. We're going to remove the stock shifter because that's where we're going to run our wiring. Quickly going to go over all the parts that you're going to need for this. A few things that we're doing on the side. We're going to get the oil tested. You're going to send that out, make sure that the engine is healthy. We've got an oil cooler adapter. It's really a transmission cooler adapter. We have the plug and play wiring harness, and don't be scared that you see it pinned and not completely finished. That's because there's no way to get this harness through the body of the car with a connector on. So it's your responsibility to get it through, then pin the connectors. Once you get the connectors pinned, it does come with everything you need. So depending on the shifter, this is an F chassis shifter, it comes with that connector. Comes with the OBD2 port, which is essentially where you're going to hook up to the TCU. The only other thing in this case is that there is a transfer case because it's an all-wheel drive model. This wiring harness goes in, sits underneath the floor, under the carpet, under the front seat. So back over here, we also got a JXB Performance upgraded center support bearing. We have an OEM replacement guibo. I recommend replacing the aluminum bolts. Ordered off the CanTCU website is this adapter for the shifter so that it bolts straight into the car. So we're removing a physical shifter that shifts the gears to a electronic shifter. And so that's the reason that we're going to pull the stock shifter out. And we're going to have an extra hole here for our wiring harness. You might wonder about bolt pattern and what 8 HPs you can use. We are using an 8 HP 45. Now, I recommend you get this from an F chassis, like an F30 that has an N55 to ensure the length and fitment is correct. The bolt pattern, if it bolts up to an N55, is pretty much always going to be the same. But the length of the transmission depends on the chassis, I believe. An X5 transmission will not work in this application. It needs to be the same length so that you can reuse your stock drive shaft. 45 is the only one that I know retains the bell housing pattern of N54, N55. When you go to an 8 HP 50 out of, say, a 340 or a 51, I think out of a Supra, it does not have that same bolt pattern. And then if you go to 8 HP 70 out of, say, an X5 diesel or a V8, those also are different bell housings. So you need an adapter plate, also the flex plate, and then you'll reuse the stock 8 HP 45 converter no matter your application unless you go aftermarket. What we're going to be doing next is pulling out the stock shifter. It's pretty easy. You're going to get the panel pulled up. Once this trim piece is off, there's 3 bolts that hold the stock shifter on. We're going to go ahead and remove that. We're going to install the new shifter, and then we're going to get the wiring routed through. Remove the stock shifter. You're going to have a little bit going on here. One thing you're going to end up looping so that you don't have any CAN bus codes. I'll explain that a little later. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to get this adapter piece bolted up. Also need this accessory bag. There are 4 screws, as you can see here. That's what you're going to use to attach the shifter to the adapter, and the 3 Allen heads are going to attach the adapter onto the chassis. As you can see, we have the shifter in and it's fully in place. We also ran the harness. I'm going to get under the car and I'm going to show you that right now. The way you have it, you're going to throw the pins through this hole where the old shifter used to be. You can see this is what you get. It's essentially a jumper, so you can come off of the existing harness. Actually fits really nice. So the big thing here is you want to be able to tuck it out of the way of the transmission. It's to run something like this, right? Essentially, it's going to have to run like this. But you also don't want it to pinch. So I'll show you how I end up doing that, but just wanted to get this connected. We're going to take the stock trans cooler off, the 8 HP transmission. There we go. The fluid will clean up, but essentially with the smaller O-rings go on this side, and the bigger O-rings here to adapt the stock transmission lines right to the 8 HP. They make this stuff super easy. Anybody could do this at home. A little bit of time and research. Well, we're getting ready to put the trans up. For now, I've zip tied this out of the way just so that when we put the trans up, we can pick its final mounting location. We'll use the stock brackets for the harness here, and then it'll plug in. So what we're doing now is we're going to take the flex plate off. We're going to do the rear main seal. We've got an assortment of different services here. So we've got the transmission fluid. we've got front diff fluid, and we have transfer case fluid. Next step is going in the car. What we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be adding our pins into the connectors. First thing I did was I disassembled the panel so that I can run the wiring underneath the panel. And I'm gonna give you a good view. The wiring snakes in there. And then it comes right up into the glove box. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna get that panel put back up. I'm gonna secure the wiring. I'm gonna show you guys how to add the pins. Once the pins are done, the only thing left for us is gonna be the shifter wiring and then the transfer case wiring. If you're rear wheel drive, it'll be the same process, but you're not gonna have transfer case wiring. And there we go. We've got the panel back on. The first thing you wanna do is make sure that the yellow piece is in the up and unlocked position. This is how it came, which is a huge help. So here on the connector, it's marked A, B, C, and then you've got 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this would be A1 through A8, B1 through B8, C1 through C8. And then if you come over here, I would always recommend looking at the instructions in case any of the wiring has changed. You can see A8 is the ground, and then you have your entire pinout. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna put the pins through. Again, if you have that yellow piece up in the unlocked position, it should be easy as putting the pin in the correct orientation, pushing it through till you hear it click, getting all the pins through, making sure they're in position, and then pushing the locking tab back down. Again, it explains it pretty well right here. You've got all the pins in for what comes from the transmission. The next part, we're gonna loop the block connector. You're just gonna go ahead and connect it like so. So once it's fully in, seated, you're happy with it, you can just go ahead and tuck it out of the way. It's not going to be used anymore. This is going to prevent any issues with CAN, getting any codes, anything related to switching your shifter. Or we're just going to follow the connector. The connector does have your inputs here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then on the bottom here, you've got your other series of numbers. There's not A, B, C. It's just as simple as being numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Be sure to follow the diagram given in your instructions. We've got our OBD2 connector all pinned. What I'm going to do is put the locking plate in. You can see it's notched. It can only go in one way. Boom. There's a little piece that goes over the connector to finalize it. This is going to come off again. I'm leaving this open because I'm going to have to add some things for the T case, which I believe is just CAN high and low. At this point in time, you're good on this end. I'm gonna move on. Back underneath, we got the transmission mounted. That's gonna go in the same way as our 6HP21. We've got the adapter plate just put into place. There are 2 smaller O-rings. They're gonna go over the stock lines, and there are 2 bigger O-rings that go over the fitting, and then you're gonna pop it into place, make sure it seats fully. It should be flush. There should not be a gap. For the wiring, I showed you earlier how I routed it. I kept it zip tied, and when I put the trans up, I snipped it. I plugged it in the transmission, and you can see there's no obstructions. The stock wiring as well, there's no obstructions. Make sure, please make sure that you have no wiring running. And here, I'm gonna get this all pushed into place. You don't want any wiring running anywhere near your front drive shaft. That's gonna come to your transfer case. You wanna keep this clean and clear. The amount of harnesses I've seen from installers get messed up in the transmission, even stock. It's kind of sad, so please make sure you do that properly. And then there's a stock bracket for the stock harness I've utilized with the zip tie. Keep the harness tucked up, but we've got the harness fully in place. We're gonna do the transmission service and the transfer case service next, so we're gonna go ahead and throw that up. But in terms of 8 HP swap, we're pretty much done with anything that we needed to add. The only other thing to do is to actually mount the TCU into the car, but I'm waiting to do that to the very end. And then I also have to wire up the transfer case. I hadn't intended to do it with all the wiring. We're actually missing a connector. I'm not gonna say it's anybody's fault, but it did not come with the shifter connector. So we're gonna go ahead and keep moving on where we can. We're gonna do the services, all the fluids. We've got the transmission mounted. We've serviced the transfer case, the front diff and the rear diff. Right now we're filling the fluid for the transmission, following the OEM procedure. In this case, we're using ZF Lifeguard, who's a customer provided fluid. I do think it's a good fluid. It's the OEM recommended fluid. If you're gonna be performance oriented and you're gonna be putting a little more power through the transmission, I like the Adrenaline SS. It's Hot Shot Secret brand. That stuff's really good. It'll allow you to hold a little more power in a stock transmission. You're able to get the lines adapted. I will say, honestly, we had to pull it a little bit to get it over. Everything on the kit, that was actually the hardest thing to get in. It wasn't very difficult, it was just kind of tricky. You kind of had to pull on it to get it in, and then seat the O-ring. And then, of course, the bolt was a little bit of a pain to get in. But other than that, everything is pretty straightforward on this car. I'm gonna go ahead and end the video right here. The next video, I'll be going over the shifter wiring, configuring, flashing the transmission and the transfer case, as well as the transfer case wiring. So if you're interested, outside of actually installing the 8HP45, getting it configured, tuned, and ready to go when driving, that is gonna be the next video. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, throw the comments down below. Please like and subscribe if you're looking for more 8HP content, N54, N55. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.